You've probably been told a third world war is impossible. Unthinkable, right? But what if the very system designed to prevent it is actually the thing that could start it? The evidence we're about to go through suggests the world is closer to a major global war than it's been in decades. And it's not going to start the way you think it is.
Now, that is not a line from some Hollywood movie. That's a direct quote from people whose entire job, their entire career, is to see what's coming over the horizon. And they're seeing echoes of the days right before World War II. That fact alone should make us all stop and ask a very serious question. Because the answer isn't what you see in the movies, some villain pushing a big red button. That's a fiction, and frankly, it's a comforting one. The truth is a lot messier, a lot more chaotic, and because of that, a lot more likely. So we're going to investigate this like a cold case, because the clues to what could happen next are hidden in a pattern from the past that almost everyone has forgotten.
Our first piece of evidence takes us back more than a century, because if you really want to understand the dangers we're facing in 2026, you first have to understand what went wrong in the summer of 1914. You see the pattern, it's starting to repeat itself.
This right here, this blows up the biggest myth there is about how world wars begin. We think of World War I as some huge, evil, perfectly planned event. It wasn't. It was a cascade of blunders, a series of miscalculations. It was a complex system of alliances that basically took on a life of its own, dragging nations into a war that, get this, none of their leaders actually wanted. Sound familiar at all?
I mean, let's look at how fast the world can burn. It starts with one assassination in a regional city on June 28th. Just 6 weeks later, the entire planet is at war. This wasn't a plan, it was a chain reaction. One single tripwire set off a dozen others. And the most important thing to realize is this: it can happen again.
So where are those tripwires today? Well, in 2026, we're not just watching one fragile region. We are now looking at a global web of interconnected hotspots, and any single one of them is capable of starting that same 6-week countdown to chaos.
Our investigation has uncovered 3 main flashpoints. Now, any one of them could ignite on its own. But the hidden danger, the secret to this whole system, is that they seem almost designed to ignite each other. Let's look at the evidence.
First up, Taiwan. And let's forget politics for a moment. This island is the absolute linchpin of your world. The phone you're holding, the car you drive, the data centers that run our civilization, all of it depends on the most advanced computer chips. And a staggering 90% of them are made in this one place. A crisis here doesn't just slow the global economy, it stops it, dead in its tracks. Second, Eastern Europe. The real risk here isn't a planned invasion, it's an accident. A jet gets shot down, there's a clash at the border, a cyber attack gets blamed on the wrong country. Think of it like a high-stakes poker game, where a defensive bet is seen as an aggressive attack, and suddenly there's an all-out brawl that nobody can stop.
And this is where all the pieces of the puzzle really start to snap together. Because these are not isolated problems. A conflict in the Pacific means you have to pull ships and planes out of Europe. An escalation in Europe means you suddenly can't deal with a crisis in the Middle East. You see? Every new fire makes it that much harder to put out the others. Which brings us to the first, pretty chilling realization of this investigation. We're not looking at 3 separate fires. We're looking at 3 corners of the same single global bonfire. The fuel from one is already feeding the flames of the others. And this interconnected system, that's what makes 2026 so uniquely dangerous.
But there is one more layer to this whole thing, a factor that simply didn't exist in 1914. It's the ultimate complication, the one that changes every single calculation and raises the stakes from just catastrophic to, well, extinction level. We have to talk about the nuclear shadow. 12,500. The number is so big it's almost abstract. It's enough to end civilization as we know it many, many times over. And this terrifying potential is the silent, humming background noise to every single decision being made by world leaders right now.
You know, for over 75 years, the thing that has kept the peace between major powers is a terrifying idea called mutual assured destruction. You know it as MAD. The logic is brutally simple. If you nuke me, I nuke you, and we're both annihilated. So nobody's crazy enough to start. It worked. But the world of 2026 is starting to break the rules of that old game.
The new danger is coming from these so-called tactical nuclear weapons. They're smaller, they're designed for use on a battlefield. But their very existence blurs that bright red line between a normal war and a nuclear one. They make using a nuke seem more plausible, more thinkable. And that dangerously lowers the bar for doing the unthinkable.
And this reveals the great, twisted paradox of our time.
The very fear of nuclear war that stops big countries from fighting each other directly, well, that same fear creates the space for dozens of smaller proxy wars. And those smaller wars have a really nasty habit of escalating until, guess what? The big powers get pulled in anyway. The system always finds a way.
So, after looking at the history, the modern flashpoints, and the nuclear paradox, what's the final verdict? What is the real threat that we are all actually facing?
Strategic experts call it inadvertent escalation. That's the key finding here. The ultimate enemy isn't some Bond villain bent on taking over the world. The real enemy is the system itself, this hugely complex, interconnected machine that could spiral into a war that nobody chose and that nobody can stop. So let's be absolutely clear. A deliberate, planned World War II-style conflict? All the analysts agree that is highly unlikely. No rational leader wants that. But an accidental crisis? A regional conflict that blows up and cascades out of control because of a miscalculation, a miscommunication, and one of those tripwires we've been talking about? That is the real risk. And it is not small. In fact, it's growing. And this is why this matters to you right now in 2026. The underlying conditions, the tripwires, the rivalries, the fragile systems, they are more dangerous right now than at any point in a generation. You are living through a period of risk that your parents just didn't have to face.
The generation that lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis stared directly into the abyss, and they found a way to take a step back. The question for us, for our leaders, for our entire world is a simple and terrifying one. Do we still know how?